Good evening, everyone. This week's parsha is Parshas Shmini, Tavshin Pei Aleph. I'd like to dedicate tonight's Drasha in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shlomis Rabinowitz, Shlomis Maser Rabbi Yaakov Eliezer. So the end of this week's parsha is where the Torah teaches us about kosher, non-kosher animals. And at the conclusion of the parsha, in the last two verses of the parsha, we read, this is the law of the animal, the bird, and every living creature that swarms in the water, and for every creature that creeps on the ground. Lahavdil, to distinguish between the impure and pure, and between the creature that can be eaten, and the creature that may not be eaten. So Rashi, in his commentary on the words Lahavdil ben Atam ben Atar, Torah is telling us to distinguish between a impure and impure, which means a kosher and non-kosher. So Rashi cites a question on the words ben Atam ben Atar. Sarach Laimar, does it need to say, meaning do we need to be able to distinguish ben Chamar Lapar, between a donkey and a cow? Like from Mufurashim, are they not already explicit? We know one has split hooves, one doesn't have split hooves, one chews its cud, one doesn't chew its cud. No need for distinguishing, any major distinguishing. The Torah has to say, do we have to make sure to distinguish between kosher and not kosher? Ella rather, the Torah's demand to be able to distinguish is in Tamei Lacha L'Tahira Lacha, between something that is not kosher to you or that is kosher to you. And what does that mean? Whether half of the windpipe has been slaughtered, to where most of it has been slaughtered. Now, what this means is that we know you can have a kosher animal, a kosher species of animal, but it's not kosher to eat unless it has shchita, unless it's been slaughtered according to Jewish law. Now, Jewish law mandates that the slaughtering be done by cutting the kanan veshet, the windpipe and the food pipe of an animal. They're both cut in a smooth cutting back and forth, and that is what allows them to be slaughtered. That's what allows them to be eaten, and shchita and ritual slaughter, as it's sometimes called, has been performed. Now, how much of the pipes have to be slaughtered? And the answer is that essentially the majority of the pipes have to be slaughtered. The majority of, let's say, the windpipe has to be slaughtered to be considered properly slaughtered. If half of it was only cut and the animal dies, the same way it would die if it was all cut, it's not kosher. Excuse me. It has to be slaughtered. It has to be that the windpipe is cut. Not cut only halfway, but the majority. If the majority of it is cut, it is considered halachically cut, and it's been done properly. So when the Torah says lahavdil, to distinguish between that which is kosher and not kosher, means to distinguish between what's kosher for you and what's not kosher for you, whether it was slaughtered properly or not, which means, as Rashi cites, has only half of it been slaughtered, or has the majority of it been slaughtered. That's what you need to be able to distinguish. You need to know enough, to be expert enough, to be able to distinguish between the two in order to be able to be permitted to eat it. So what we have here is a halacha law in shchita, in the halachas of ritual slaughtering, that each pipe has to be slaughtered the majority and not a half. The difference between the two is minute. You have to get over half. You have to be able to know how to tell. Has only half been done? Has more than half been done? By the way, nowadays we don't do it this way. It's done in a much more definitive way to know that it's been cut. But according to the letter of the law, if half of it is cut, it's not kosher. If the majority of it has been cut, that means a little bit more than a half has been cut, it is kosher. And that's what the Torah is telling us. We have to be able to distinguish between. Now, this example, this halacha, of where we have a world of a difference between whether it's let's put it this way, a very small amount will make all the difference in the world as to whether something is kosher or not kosher, with all the ramifications involved. When corporal punishment was being practiced, if you were to eat an animal that was improperly slaughtered, you could receive lashes for that. So the difference between cutting half the windpipe and the majority of the windpipe could be lashes. It's a very small amount. It's almost indistinguishable, but it's a very small amount. So this minute difference makes all the difference in the world. And this raises a question that we could ask about many facets of Jewish law, of where, we have these very, how do we say it? These very subtle differences that make all the difference in the world according to Jewish law. And it's hard to understand, does it really make a difference? Halfway, majority? This little difference should make such a huge difference in Judaism? These kinds of little details that seemingly don't mean much, why are we so caught up in it? Why are we so focused on it? Why does it make such a difference? Is that really so important? A difference between half and a little bit more? And the truth is that according to Jewish law, the majority is like cutting the entire thing. But that's in halach. Halach considers that way. But in reality, the difference is very, very small. And sometimes people wonder, does it really make a difference this little bit? Should this really make so much of a difference in whether I can eat it or not? There are so many other things. We just got to finish doing the mitzvah of matzah on Pesach. And there's an amount of matzah we're supposed to eat in order for the mitzvah to be fulfilled. And we have these, try to figure out, there's a certain volume, how much you have to eat. We try to figure out with the flat matzahs, how to figure out if you're eating enough that would fill this volume. Does how much I eat, a little bit more, a little bit less, does it really make much of a difference? And this is a question that is posed in many facets of law. Why are we so caught up in the minutia and in these little details? Do these little details make such a big difference? Did I eat this much matzah, that much matzah? Did I cut this much of the windpipe, that much of the windpipe? Why do these seemingly small details make such a big difference? So I'm going to share with you something that I've mentioned before. And this is an email that somebody showed me. And apparently it is an email that was part of a question and answer. I could ask a rabbi email. And, there's a name from it, but it says 2 undisclosed recipients. And it's from 2006. And it's called, and the email starts up with question of the week. Why does the Jewish religion seem to obsess over insignificant details? How much matzah do we have to eat? Which spoon did I use for milk and which for meat? What is the right way to tie my shoelaces? Halacha says you should put on your right shoe first, then your left shoe, tie the left shoe first, tie the right shoe. And there's reasons for this. I mean, it's about what we see by tefillin. We are, or I should say, back up. We always give precedence to the right in Jewish law. Just like with tying, we give precedence to the left because by tefillin, we bind the tefillin on our left hand, on our weaker hand. So we have reasons behind it, but it just seems like so much fuss over something not so important. It seems to me that this misses the bigger picture by focusing on minutia. Is this nitpicking what Jews call spirituality? That's the question that was posed. Or I'll say supposedly posed. But it's our question of the obsession with what seems to be insignificant details. It's hard to appreciate, it's hard to understand. What's it all about? Why does it have so much meaning? So then in the email, in parentheses, He writes, I actually already sent you this question over a week ago and didn't receive a reply. Could it be that you have finally been asked a question that you can't answer? That's the question of the week. Answer. I never claim to have all the answers. There are many questions that are beyond me. It happens to be that I did answer your question and you did get the answer. I sent the reply immediately. The fact that you didn't receive it is itself the answer to your question. You see, I sent you a reply, but I wrote your email address leaving out the dot before the com. I figured that you should still receive the email because after all, it's only one little dot missing. I mean, come on, it's not as if I wrote the wrong name or something drastic like that. Would anybody be so nitpicky as to differentiate between Yahoo.com and Yahoo.com? Isn't it a bit ridiculous that you didn't get my email just because of a little dot? No, it's not ridiculous. Because the dot is not just a dot. It represents something. The dot has meaning far beyond the pixels on the screen that form it. To me, it may seem insignificant, but that is simply due to my ignorance of the ways of the web. All I know is that with the dot, the message gets to the right destination. Without it, the message is lost to oblivion. Jewish practices have infinite depth. Each nuance and detail contains a world of symbolism, and every dot counts. When they are performed with precision, a spiritual vibration is emailed throughout the universe, all the way to God's inbox. Basically, the answer to the question is that if we understood everything that Hashem has put into the Torah, if we understand the depth of the Torah that Hashem has given us, then we would understand why every detail makes a huge difference. The same way the dot before the com makes a huge difference. We don't know why. Those who do know, understand, those who are learned in the ways of computers and the web do understand why. But those of us who don't understand why, we just know that's the way it is, although it seems very insignificant. If we would understand the depths of Torah, we would understand why every detail makes a universe of a difference. And it makes a difference in the purpose of why Hashem has given us the Torah. It makes a difference in what Hashem wants the Torah to do for the world, for the present world, for the history of the world. Everything that we do, as he says, when performed with precision, a spiritual vibration is emailed throughout the universe all the way to God's inbox. Everything that we do makes a difference into what Hashem brings down into the world. There's a process. We do a mitzvah, it sends, we'll call it a vibration up to the heavens, and then down from the heavens comes the blessings that we want to be showered with. That's the way the system works. How does that, what makes that happen? The mitzvahs that we do, and not just the mitzvah that we do. Of course, every mitzvah has a meaning that we're supposed to internalize into our hearts. We do have to make sure that we don't get too focused on detail and lose the bigger picture. There is a point to that, but but they're not exclusive. It's not mutually exclusive to be focused on detail and still have your focus on the bigger picture, because actually being focused on the details is part of the bigger picture. Hashem gave us a Torah. He knows what it's all about, much more than we could ever even fathom. And every detail has meaning, has purpose, and makes a difference in the world's, how the world exists, what happens in the world, what happens in our lives, what happens in our family lives, what happens in the lives of everyone around us. We don't see it. We don't even realize it. You know, when the study of Kabbalah is a study of where one gets a little bit of it, gets a picture of what are the effects of mitzvahs on the world. That we are part of a spiritual reality. We're not just part of a physical reality. We're part of a spiritual reality. And actually, our spiritual reality is a reality that has the greatest bearing on our physical reality. That spiritual reality is governed by, is influenced, is even determined by our actions through the mitzvahs that we do and how well we do them and with the intent that we do them. They're all important. Therefore, the Torah tells us that we have to be able to distinguish between, was the windpipe cut a little bit, cut halfway, or a little bit more? That little bit, we may not understand why that little bit should make such a difference, but it does. That's part of what we believe in. That's part of our emunah, our faith in Hashem and the Torah that he gave us. This touches on something in the beginning of the parsha that we discussed this week about the sin of Nadav and Avihu, who went and brought the incense in a way that was supposed to be brought. And we discussed that their motivation was because that when they saw Hashem's expression of love for the Jewish people, when he sent down the fire from heaven onto the altar to burn their sacrifices, they wanted to reciprocate that love. They had a burning desire to reciprocate that love. But because a burning desire to show how much you love Hashem doesn't allow you to do beyond what Hashem commands or allows to be done. Because again, he knows how everything works. He has his reasons of how things work and why things need to be done in a certain way. And that's what we need to do, and that's what's best for us. It's all the same idea. It's Hashem's Torah. He knows what's best for us, for the world. He knows more than any of us how it is that the Torah affects our lives and the world. And the truth is, the more that there is the ability to study and to get more of an understanding of it. But some of it is beyond us. Some of it will always be beyond us. We can get some kind of an inkling of understanding. It's possible to get some kind of understanding at some level. But the main idea is that just like we accept the importance of the dot before the com, because that's the way it is, we may not understand why it is that way, how it works, but we know that's the reality. The same thing when it comes to mitzvahs. The reality is that every detail makes a huge difference. Every detail counts. And yes, we should never lose the focus on the bigger picture many times. Sometimes people get too focused on the details of a mitzvah and forget about appreciating the mitzvah in a bigger picture. That can happen. But we should never think that focusing on the details means that you're not focusing on the bigger picture. On the contrary, you are. Because the bigger picture is that every single little detail counts and makes a huge difference. Have a wonderful Shabbos.